Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jeff, and today on Not Just Book Reviews, I'm going to be taking a look at the very first James Bond novel, Casino Royale, which was written back in 1953. And I've got these wonderful trade paperback versions. They're being put out by Thomas and Mercer, which I feel like Penguin has maybe subbed it out. But so there's Casino Royale, which is the second one is From Russia with Love. And then I also have On Her Majesty's Secret Service and The Man with the Golden Gun. And I'm hoping to get the rest of the Bond books in these versions. I have mass market paperback versions of a couple of them that look like very pulpish 1930s novels. But I really like these. Really wonderful white paper, good font, good reading experience. So the first Bond novel was 178 pages, like not very long. And it's just a classic kind of, very simple spy thriller, nothing crazy. But we are being introduced to this character, James Bond, for the first time. So the plot basically is M has sent Bond to play cards against this character named Le Chiffre. Because this guy is laundering money, or he kind of works for SMERSH. SMERSH actually was a real group within the Soviet Union, and its tagline was also "Death to Spies." It was a counterintelligence group that operated in the Soviet Union, so that's real enough. And so Le Chiffre kind of works for SMERSH, and he lost a lot of money in a strange situation where I think Le Chiffre bought into prostitution in France, and then something happened in the late 50s where I guess prostitution was outlawed and he lost a whole bunch of money. And so now he needs to make up the money or SMERSH will probably kill him. So, like many villains and gamblers who think this is the smartest way to go make money, he heads to the French Riviera to play baccarat to kind of make up the loss. So that's kind of the setup of the book. And M decides that they've had very little luck trying to get this guy, and although this is a lark, maybe if they put some money behind Bond and he's a little lucky, Le Chiffre can be bankrupted at the tables. So some of the side characters, Renee Mathis, who is Bond's contact his who works with, I'm not sure if he's with French intelligence, but he works with MI6. Felix Leiter also makes his first appearance in this book. And he is in the casino with Bond, and there are some plot things that unfold with him, which is really cool. And of course, Vesper Lynd, who's his first kind of paramour in these novels. And this kind of sets up what happens in some novels, some succeeding novels, where Bond loses the girl, and she dies, or he falls in love with the girl and he dies. It happens in this novel. It happens in On Her Majesty's Secret Service in an incredibly dramatic fashion. So there is this subtext to Bond that doesn't get into the movie version of Bond, that Bond is kind of a tragic figure in that he has had devastating love losses in his life, and Vesper is one of them. In the very last Bond movie that just came out with Daniel Craig, there is a scene where he visits Vesper Lynd's grave near the beginning of the movie. So we're getting a little bit of that finally later on. But most of the incantations of Bond, with Connery and Moore being the two biggest ones, and obviously Brosnan. Bond is played for really sophisticated. He's cool. He can be cold as ice. Women come and go, and he's extremely skilled at what he does. But in Fleming, there are all those qualities as well, but there is also an undercurrent of tragedy which cuts under him as well, which makes him a little more interesting of a character on the page than he is on the screen. So one of the interesting things that Fleming does is he introduces you to the game of baccarat. So in later Fleming novels, I've discovered that he was kind of a prototype of a techno-thriller writer, and by that I mean that often in a Fleming chapter will be something he researched to exhaustion and will present you with some information which kind of makes the plot go by. As you're, in a weird way, the plot is moving forward, but you're also learning things and discovering new things as you go along. On Her Majesty's Secret Service, he did a huge deep dive into the landed titles and names in England. In Dr. No, it's all about Japan. So in this one, it's not as much. We don't get as much of that. We get a little bit with food. and some of Bond's philosophy, which I'll talk to in a moment. But there's a wonderful section about Baccarat. And, Americans, we don't know what the hell Baccarat is. But the centerpiece, really, of this novel is Bond playing Le Chiffre in Baccarat. So he has to educate the reader a little bit about the game. And, of course, he uses Vesper Lynd as the prod to, how do you play? So it's an interesting game. It's kind of like blackjack, where one thing I don't understand is someone has to be the bank. So I think the way Le Chiffre is going to make his money is Le Chiffre is the bank. So in a sense, you pay to be the dealer. And I guess when you pay to be the dealer, like if you paid to be the dealer of a blackjack game, you have an advantage. So if you're the dealer, the house often wins, right? But you can also, I think in Baccarat, it might be easier to beat the house. I'm not sure. But so the deal with Baccarat is you have to reach 9. So that's the thing. And you can reach 9 in a lot of different ways. And here's one of the tricky ways. So obviously, if you get one card and it's a 9, you can not get another card, flip the card, and that's like Baccarat. You can get a 4 or a 5, and that's 9, and that's Baccarat. But you can also get, King, Queen, Jack have no value. They're 0. But you can get Baccarat by adding numbers past 10, right? So if you had a 7 and a 6, you don't have 13, you have 3. If you have 5 and a 5, you have 10, which is, 1 over Baccarat, but it's also 0, which is terrible. But you 7 and 8, right? 15, but it's 5. So if I had a 7 and 8, which made 15, I had a 5 in Baccarat. And you had an 8 and 8, which makes 16, which means you have a 6 in Baccarat, you win. So once you kind of get the game, and then once Fleming explains to you how it works, then there's drama in the game because you know what cards that Bond has. You don't know what cards Le Chiffre has. So he creates a wonderful sense of drama as he narrates this game. And I was kind of surprised when I finished the Baccarat. It's only one piece of it in the middle, but it's a decent chapter or two. Actually, more than one chapter, because Bond kind of gets busted at first. And then Felix Leiter buys him back in, and then he's like, I can beat this man. So I was surprised when I finished that, wow, that was really a wonderfully dramatic chapter of him playing a game that I've never played in my life. But he described it enough, and the game itself, I guess, was interesting enough to where I was hooked. So that's, again, his skill as a novelist really on display here. So one interesting thing about Casino Royale is we get a really good sense of Bond. Bond is laid out as a character, his faults and his good side, and kind of what he's about from this very first book. So I wanted to read some snippets about what Bond is and how he's laid out in this book. So of course, first we'll have to deal with the ugly side of it, which is Bond's view of women. Which comes out straight away. So when he finds out that Vesper Lynd has been assigned to him, there's a section in the text about how he's thinking about it. And so I'll read the paragraph. Quote, Bond sat at the window and gathered his thoughts. Nothing that Mathis had told him was reassuring. He was completely blown and under really professional surveillance. An attempt might be made to put him away before he had a chance to pit himself against Le Chiffre at the tables. The Russians had no stupid prejudices about murder. And then there was this pest of a girl. He sighed. Women were for recreation. On a job, they got in the way and fogged things up with sex and hurt feelings and all the emotional baggage they carried around. One had to look out for them and take care of them. Bitch, Bond said. So that's James Bond's view on women, ladies and gentlemen. So there's another one that I would like to read as well. So another part is when Vesper Lynd gets captured. She's kidnapped, and Bond's thinking about how he may or may not rescue her or needs to deal with the problem. And he says, quote, this was just what he had been afraid of. These blithering women who thought they could do a man's work. Why the hell couldn't they stay at home and mind their pots and pans and stick to their frocks and gossip and leave men's work to the men? And now for this to happen to him, just when the job had come off so beautifully. For Vesper to fall for an old trick like that and get herself snatched and probably held to ransom like some bloody heroine in a strip cartoon. The silly bitch, end quote. So, yeah, this is a big, there's no doubt that the text Bond has a nasty set of flaws. This is the biggest one, his view towards women. Frankly, I think it makes Bond a more interesting character because he is possessed of characteristics that are probably, to maybe a lot of men, even in the 60s, were like abhorrent. But men now in our generation, in our decade, are like, oh boy, this is really... But it makes him a real character in a sense. Fleming wrote this character this way. He's unapologetically this way. We may have our own judgments of what he is, but there's also a lot about Bond that we like. We like his expertise. We like how he moves through his world. He's an enjoyable character to read about and fun one to walk through the books with. And yet he has these flaws. So I think I enjoy embracing the mess that is literary characters who fall afoul, of where we are as a culture. And if they, to me, the writing stands the test of time because it's still interesting writing and it's still good plots and it moves well. And frankly, to me, it makes Bond a more interesting character overall. So anyway, I wanted to get the negative aspects of him over with first and then go on to some interesting things about him. So another thing about Bond, in the early books and in the early movies, Bond is often seen in casinos and at gambling tables. He is a gambler. And in this first book, he kind of ruminates as to why. And here's a quote. Quote, Bond has always been a gambler. He loved the dry riffle of the cards and the constant, unemphatic drama of the quiet figures round the green tables. He liked the solid, studied comfort of card rooms and casinos, the well-padded arms of the chairs, the glass of champagne or whiskey at the elbow, the quiet, unhurried attention of good servants. He was amused by the impartiality of the roulette ball and of the playing cards, and their eternal bias. He liked being an actor and a spectator, and from his chair to take part in other men's dramas and decisions until it came to his own turn to say that vital yes or no, generally on a 50-50 chance. Above all, he liked it that everything was one's own fault. There was only oneself to praise or blame. Luck was a servant and not a master. Luck had to be accepted with a shrug or taken advantage of up to the hilt. But it had to be understood and recognized for what it was, and not confused with a faulty apprehension of the odds. For at gambling, the deadly sin is to mistake bad play for bad luck. And luck in all its moods had to be loved and not feared. Bond saw luck as a woman, to be softly wooed or brutally ravaged, never pandered to or pursued. But he was honest enough to admit that he had never yet been made to suffer by cards or by women. One day, and he accepted the fact, he would be brought to his knees by love or by luck. When that happened, he knew that he too would be branded with the deadly question mark he recognized so often in others, the promise to pay before you have lost, the acceptance of fallibility, end quote. So, two parts of that quote. One part is a quality that I really like about Bond, and that he talks about luck in a way that it reminds him that my life is mine to take personal responsibility for. I'm not going to, Bond's not going to be the guy complaining that he doesn't get the cards or that he doesn't get lucky. And he likes to be reminded of that fact. It's kind of like he likes to be reminded that, hey man, at the end of the day, it's chance, yet there is a sense of skill behind it. And that one quote about to blame your situation on bad luck rather than bad play was the thing to avoid. So to me, that's a very interesting part of his character, and it's admirable to someone like him is that no excuses. You do your thing, you do your job, and if things don't work out, it's about you. You kind of failed, and it's kind of your deal. Not that this is a self-hating thing where it's always you, but he likes that it's up to him to do or not to do. So that's the one part of it. The second part of it, that he conflates luck with women and with vulnerability and with surrender. Like there's a whole psychoanalysis in there about his character. Obviously, again, more of his retrograde attitudes towards women, but also recognizing that it's someday that he will be brought to his knees by love. Again, it's a complex character in that he is very, retrograde in his attitudes, and yet he recognized that at some point he will surrender. Although it's a very, they're either this or that. Either he'll be brought to his knees by women, or they're this other thing. But still, I just find that a very interesting couple of paragraphs about Bond and about he's never this complicated in the movies. And also, what's not often done in the films is Bond is love for food. So Bond is a gourmand, as probably Ian Fleming was, and he takes a ridiculous pleasure over food. And actually, in Casino Royale, he makes mention of. I want to read a passage of him ordering some very fancy French food, and then him reflecting how kind of ridiculous it is himself, which again is a little more complex Bond than we're used to seeing. So. He and Vesper, obviously he's showing off for Vesper. He's in a restaurant, a very expensive fresh restaurant that he's been to before. And he's ordering some food. Now, he turned back to the menu. I myself will accompany Mademoiselle with the caviar, but then I would like a very small tornadoes underdone with sauce béarnaise and a coeur d'archot. While Mademoiselle is enjoying the strawberries, I will have half an avocado pear with a little French dressing. Do you approve? End quote, right? And then further on with the drink. If you agree, said Bond, I would prefer to drink champagne with you tonight. Yes, I would like champagne, she said. With his finger on the page, Bond turned to the sommelier, the Tattinger 45. A fine wine, monsieur, said the sommelier, but if monsieur will permit. He pointed with his pencil. The Blanc de Blanc Brut 1943 of the same mark is without equal. Bond smiled. So be it, he said. Bond says, quote, that is not a very well-known brand, Bond explained to his companion, but it is probably the finest champagne in the world. He grinned suddenly at the touch of pretension in his remark. You must forgive me, he said. I take a ridiculous pleasure in when I eat and drink. It comes partly from being a bachelor, but mostly from habit of taking a lot of trouble over details. It's very persnickety and old-maidish, really. But then when I'm working, I generally have to eat my meals alone, and it makes them more interesting when one takes trouble. End quote. That's fantastic. Like, I never knew that about Bond, you know, and that he's reflecting about how ridiculous it all is, that he's not trying to play it up and like bluster to Vesper, like what a great gourmand he is. He's like, that's ridiculous, but this it's kind of my thing, right? I thought that was very humanizing of the character. So I really enjoyed that. And so also, you know, what's rarely dealt with in the films and in popular culture is Bond's relationship to the fact that he has a 00 status. And that he does have a license to kill people when he deems it fit in his missions. So this is Bond explaining, again, I think it's to Vesper. You know, she's kind of put in the book in this way to kind of get him to tease him out and to get him to talk a little bit about, you know, who he is and what he does. And so a lot of these things that he talks about are in relation to her, which is a great way for a writer to get a character out without, you know, having to write tons of third person to the sides to the reader, like James was this way and that way and the other way. You know, he's kind of telling him about himself. And it's just, it kind of flows a little better in the narrative. So she's curious about his 00 status, and he says, quote, Bond frowned. It's not difficult to get a 00 number if you're prepared to kill people, he said. That's all the meaning it has. It's nothing to be particularly proud of. I've got the corpses of a Japanese cipher expert in New York and a Norwegian double agent in Stockholm to thank for being a 00. He's young in his career, obviously, in this book. Probably quite decent people. They just got caught up in the gale of the world, like that Yugoslav that Tito bumped off. It's a confusing business, but if it's one's profession, one does what one's told. How do you like the grated egg with your caviar? End quote, right? So in one sense, he's not, you know, giving you like, you know, yeah, he's not triumphant about it. Very cool, very businesslike, and also, you know, and cold in that I don't even hate these people. They just kind of got caught up in the wrong game at the wrong time. It was my job to put them down. I put them down, you know. And I don't know, I find that very compelling for a character, that it's not the usual, he's not waving the British flag around, you know, and then, you know, the England must be protected and all that crap. No. So very interesting. So you get a good deal of Bond. Now, there's a point in this book that Bond actually does fall for Vesper, very much. And then it turns out that she betrays him in some way. If you've seen Casino Royale, you pretty much know the story. And I'll talk about the movie very shortly. And he very coldly, I mean, once he kind of discovers that she betrayed him, and he's not sure whether she really loved him or not, you know, he chimes in to M, the very last sentences of the book. He spoke quietly into the receiver. This is 007 speaking. This is an open line. It's an emergency. Can you hear me? Pass this on at once. 3030 was a double working for Redland. Yes, damn it. I said was. The bitch is dead now. And that's the end of the book. So yeah. So again, you really have this very well-rounded character. Parts of him really are abhorrent. Other parts of him are charming and interesting. And I, for one, enjoy reading about him. And I will probably finish. I started Fleming books late last year. I'm probably going to plow through. There's only like maybe 9 or 10 Bond novels, and there's a couple of short story collections. So I will definitely get through these. And again, Fleming as a novelist, he has his good and bad books. I think on Her Majesty's Secret Service, he was taking a little more care with the prose. So there are times when you get these wonderful, just pages of beautiful English sentences, just really top-notch stuff. They're very literary. He can describe things in a very wonderful manner. His dialogue is fantastic, very excellent, spare, really knows how to do dialogue well. Kind of like, in some ways, the English Elmore Leonard. Like, he really knows how to do that thing where you're seeing the subtext in the dialogue and it's very terse and it gets things across. I just find myself turning pages, even in the Bond books that are not so great. I haven't posted the video yet, but I will for The Man with the Golden Gun, which was the last Bond novel he wrote, which was kind of a subpar, like a B- affair. Even in the B-, like there's something about Fleming's writing. It's that ineffable thing of just, he's pulling me along. And I enjoy reading the books, so it's really awesome. I will talk a little bit about the movie, as I don't really want to talk about movies since this is really about the books, but this is a very special movie, Casino Royale. I think it's the best Bond movie ever made. I was really surprised to see how much, when I read the book, how much the movie follows the novel. And the novel is a little light, so they had to add stuff. So the whole beginning part, the massive chase, the plane, all that big, in the first, I think, 35 minutes of the movie, not in Casino Royale. You know, they kind of set up why Le Chiffre lost his money, whereas in the books, it's like 2 lines. Well, prostitution was outlawed in France, so now he's screwed. They show how it happens in this long, which is wonderful because they show Bond in action. And the movie starts with him earning his 00 status and getting his second kill, which is fantastic. And the thing I think was great about this movie is that it's very brutal. Bond is brutal. And the film does not shy away from it. The first 2 Bond films in the Craig canon are very brutal movies where he gets bloodied and he beats people and kills a lot of people. And, you know, it does not flinch from what a 00 status is, which I think is a great way to go. Once you get into Skyfall, Spectre, and No Time to Die, they become a little bit more like older Bond films. They're a little more jokey. They're not as brutal. Bond is a little older, a little more suave. He's not really battering people as he was in the first 2 movies. And maybe they decided to kind of like, maybe Sam Mendes said, okay, well, he's older now, and he's not the Casino Royale Bond anymore. He's a little more sophisticated, whatever. But I find that in the same way, Bond is more sophisticated a character in Casino Royale and more brutal a character than what happened afterwards. So they follow the novel very closely, and the chemistry between Vesper Lynd and Bond is wonderful. And Bond is vulnerable. And he doesn't hate women. He's just, he's a serial, he likes, there's a line in the movie where Vesper's like, am I going to have a problem with you, Bond? And he says, no, you're not my type. And she's like, smart? And he's like, no, married. So, he doesn't hate women, but he's, they made him more like a classic commitment phobe. Like, he's shut down some areas of himself. And he's just, sex is part of the game. But he doesn't hate women in this iteration of it, which is good. And after some of the really brutal fights in Casino Royale, he's looking into the mirror, steadying himself, like, okay, I've just went through the ringer, now I got to get myself back together and get back to the table. And it's wonderful. And some of the brutal scenes where he has to console Vesper. It's a beautiful scene where they're in the shower after he has to kill someone. So there's a wonderful vulnerability about Bond that is really not often in the books. Fleming doesn't really put that in a lot of the books. He flirts with it, but the films really put it in there. And it's just a wonderful movie. The action sequences are fantastic. The fight choreography is really good. So it's probably my favorite Bond film. I think they'll never do a film that's more brutal than this one. I think just because, these days with IPs and streaming platforms, it's like I was blown away when I rewatched it recently. I'm like, man, this is a brutal movie. It's like a heavy-duty R for violence, not for sex. So it's my favorite Bond film. If you haven't seen it, I would totally recommend. I think at this point it might be on Prime if you have Amazon Prime. It might even be on Netflix. I don't remember where. It's free somewhere now, but I'd recommend you seeing it. So that's my thoughts on Casino Royale. I'm kind of doing the Bond books willy-nilly. I did the Blofeld trilogy in order, but now I'm just going to kind of bop around and read the ones that appeal to me and get through Fleming's canon of Mr. James Bond. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.